The Alpha King found an injured, rejected Omega in the forest. Who hurt you? I'll tear that pack apart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our story. Isabella Stark had always felt out of place, even in her own pack. As an Omega, she had spent most of her life feeling weak, invisible, and unworthy. Her pack had cast her aside long ago, labeling her as defective because she could not shift into her wolf form like the others. Day by day, she became more of an outcast, hiding in the shadows, trying to avoid the cruel stares of those who once called her family. Her heart heavy, Isabella walked through the forest, her legs weak beneath her from the emotional weight of the day. The pack had humiliated her again at the gathering, forcing her to sing and dance for the amusement of those who saw her as nothing more than a joke. The laughter of her pack members echoed in her ears, and the cruel words of her alpha rang in her mind. You'll never be worthy, Isabella. You're nothing but a broken Omega. She had no intention of returning to the pack that night. The sting of their rejection was too much to bear. As she walked deeper into the forest, her steps faltering, she found herself drawn to a small clearing. There, hidden beneath the thick branches of the trees, she saw something strange, a figure, lying motionless on the ground. It was a wolf, bloodied and wounded, its body trembling as it struggled to stay alive. Isabella's heart ached at the sight. She approached carefully, her hands shaking as she reached out to the creature, whispering softly, "It's okay, I'll help you." As her fingers brushed against the wolf's fur, a surge of warmth ran through her. She wasn't sure how, but somehow, she knew this was no ordinary wolf. It was different. Before she could take another step, she heard a voice, low and commanding, coming from behind her. "Who hurt you?" the voice asked, its tone filled with rage. Isabella turned to find the source of the voice, her breath catching in her throat. Standing before her was a man, tall and commanding, his presence overwhelming. His eyes, a piercing silver, locked onto hers with a gaze so intense that it felt as though he could see straight into her soul. The Alpha King. She had heard the stories, of course. Alexander Knight, the ruler of all alphas, a man so feared and revered that even the strongest wolves bowed before him. And here he was, in front of her, looking at her with eyes filled with both anger and something else she couldn't quite place. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped forward, his voice low and fierce. "I'll tear that pack apart," he said, his words cutting through the night like a blade. Isabella's heart raced, a mix of fear and something else she didn't understand stirring inside her. The Alpha King had found her, and he was going to protect her. Isabella stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest as the Alpha King towered over her. His silver eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. She had never been so close to someone so powerful, someone who commanded respect without uttering a single word. She could feel the weight of his presence pressing down on her, as if the very air around them had thickened. Her mind was a whirlwind, her thoughts racing. She had just been humiliated in front of her entire pack, cast aside like a broken toy, and now, this man, the Alpha King himself, was standing before her, promising to tear apart the pack that had rejected her. Alexander Knight. His name alone sent shivers down her spine. The ruler of all alphas. The man who held power over every wolf in the land. And yet, here he was, offering her protection, offering to stand by her side. You don't have to do this," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I'm nothing. I'm just an Omega. I don't belong with someone like you." Alexander's gaze softened, but his intensity didn't fade. He stepped closer, the space between them closing with each movement. "You are not nothing," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying a weight that made her believe every word he spoke. "You are my responsibility now. No one will hurt you again." Isabella swallowed hard, her mind still struggling to understand what was happening. She had spent so long feeling worthless, invisible, and now, this powerful man, this king, was offering her something she had never dreamed possible: protection, respect, and maybe even something more. But she couldn't let herself believe it. Not yet. Not after everything she had been through. She had to remind herself that this wasn't real, that she wasn't worthy of such kindness. But before she could voice her doubts, Alexander reached out, gently lifting her chin with his fingers. "Do not doubt yourself," he said, his voice filled with a quiet strength that made her heart skip a beat. "You are far more than what they've told you, far more than what you believe." His words sank deep into her, filling the empty spaces inside her that she hadn't realized were there. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. She felt valued. Alexander didn't just see her as a broken Omega. He saw something more. He saw a woman worthy of respect, of protection, and of love. And in that moment, something inside Isabella shifted. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know what path she was walking down now. But for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. Alexander was right. She was more than she had been told. And maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of the love and respect he was offering. As Alexander turned to lead her away from the clearing, Isabella followed, her steps light for the first time in years. She didn't know what awaited her, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, with the Alpha King by her side. As Isabella followed Alexander through the dense forest, the moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. The night was quiet, save for the soft crunch of leaves under their feet. She could feel his presence beside her, strong and steady, his every step confident and sure. For the first time, she didn't feel lost. She didn't feel like an outcast. She was walking beside someone who saw her, who valued her, and for once, it felt like everything was going to be okay. The journey back to his territory was quiet, with only the occasional sound of distant wildlife breaking the silence. Alexander didn't speak at first, but Isabella could feel the weight of his gaze, always on her, as if he were watching over her every move. She tried to steady her breath, but her heart raced, not out of fear, but from the uncertainty that still lingered within her. What was she supposed to expect now? Alexander, the Alpha King, had promised her protection, but could she truly trust him? Could she truly believe that someone like her, someone who had been abandoned and humiliated, could be worthy of such protection? She looked up at him, his broad shoulders blocking the moonlight, casting him in shadow. She could barely make out the details of his face, but there was something in the way he moved, something in the way he carried himself, that reassured her. He was no ordinary alpha. He was a king, and kings didn't make promises they couldn't keep. "You've been quiet," Alexander finally said, his voice cutting through the stillness of the night. Isabella hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. I don't understand," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you helping me? Why do you care?" Alexander glanced at her, his silver eyes reflecting the light of the moon. "Because you deserve better than what they gave you," he said simply. "Because you are more than what they've told you." Isabella's heart fluttered in her chest. His words were gentle, but they held an undeniable strength. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. No one had ever made her feel like she wasn't a burden, like she wasn't a mistake. "But I'm just an Omega," she whispered. "I'm nothing." "You are not nothing," Alexander said, his voice firm. "You are mine now, Isabella, and I will not let anyone treat you like that again." His words were a declaration, an unspoken promise. Isabella couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her with such conviction. Her mind raced as she tried to process everything that had happened in such a short amount of time. Just hours ago, she had been standing in the forest, lost and broken, and now, she was walking alongside the most powerful man in the werewolf world. It felt surreal, like she was in a dream that she might wake from at any moment. But as they continued walking, the reality of the situation settled in. She was not dreaming. This was real. And as much as she wanted to doubt, as much as she wanted to hold on to the familiar pain of rejection, she couldn't. There was something in Alexander's presence that made her want to believe, want to hope. They reached a clearing, and Isabella stopped in her tracks. In front of her stood a large, imposing castle, its towers reaching toward the sky, bathed in the silver light of the moon. It was breathtaking, but it was also intimidating. She had never been in a place like this before. This was where the Alpha King lived. This was where she would stay now. "Welcome home," Alexander said softly, his voice low, almost reverent. Isabella swallowed hard, her emotions swirling inside her. She had no idea what her future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to find out. As Isabella stepped into the castle, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and unease. The grand doors closed behind them, and they were greeted by the sound of soft footsteps on the stone floor. The inside of the castle was just as imposing as the exterior, with high ceilings, rich tapestries hanging from the walls, and the faint scent of old wood and incense lingering in the air. It was a world so different from anything she had ever known. She had spent her life in the shadows, unnoticed and unimportant, and now she found herself standing in the heart of a kingdom, surrounded by luxury and power. She glanced at Alexander, who had remained silent since their arrival. His presence was undeniable, radiating authority and calm, but there was something more in the way he moved, something that told her he wasn't just a king. He was a man who had seen far more than most ever would. "This is your home now," he said, his voice soft but firm, as if to reassure her. Isabella nodded, though she felt anything but reassured. She wasn't sure what was expected of her in this grand place. She had spent so long living in fear, in constant rejection, that now, with all the attention on her, she felt almost lost. They walked through the vast hallways, passing servants and guards, who bowed their heads in respect as they moved. Isabella felt the weight of their gaze, but it was different from the mockery and disdain she had experienced in her pack. These people weren't looking down on her. They weren't laughing or judging. She was uncertain whether she should be comforted by this or frightened by it. "You're safe here, Isabella," Alexander said, breaking the silence as they came to a stop in front of a large set of double doors. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You do not need to fear anyone. Not here. Not anymore." She met his gaze, and for the first time since she had arrived, a small part of her believed him. She had never known safety like this, never felt like she truly belonged anywhere. But there was something about his words, about the way he said them, that made her heart flutter with a hope she had long forgotten. He opened the doors, revealing a grand room. The space was filled with soft light from the large windows, and the bed, bigger than anything she had ever seen, was draped in silken sheets. The walls were lined with shelves of books, and a fireplace crackled softly in the corner. It was a room meant for a queen, not someone like her. She felt like she didn't belong here, like she was an imposter in a world that was far beyond her. But as Alexander stepped inside, he gestured to the room. "This is where you will stay. You will have everything you need." Isabella stepped into the room slowly, unsure of how to react. "Thank you," she whispered, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. She wasn't sure how to accept this, how to accept the life that was being offered to her. "You don't have to thank me," Alexander replied, his voice steady and reassuring. He stepped toward her, his gaze softening for the first time since they had arrived. "This is your home now, Isabella. You are no longer alone." She nodded, but the weight of his words lingered in the air. For so long, she had been rejected, pushed aside, and told she was nothing. But now, in this place, surrounded by power and wealth, she was being told she mattered, that she was important. The idea felt foreign, like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. But as she looked around the room, as she felt the warmth from the fire and the soft comfort of the bed beneath her, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this could be her new reality. Alexander watched her for a moment before turning to leave. "I will return shortly," he said, his tone still gentle. "Rest. You've had a long journey." As he walked out of the room, Isabella sat down on the bed, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. She was no longer invisible. She was seen. She was valued. And maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that she was worthy of the life she had been given. Isabella woke to the sound of soft footsteps outside her door, the morning light filtering through the curtains and casting a warm glow across the room. She had slept more peacefully than she had in years, the heavy weight of the previous days lifting from her shoulders. She stretched slowly, feeling the softness of the sheets beneath her. This room, this place, felt like a distant dream. The life she had known was one of struggle, of rejection, and of constant uncertainty. Now, it seemed like she had stepped into a world where none of that mattered. As she stood up from the bed, her feet touching the cold floor, she paused to glance around the room once more. The walls were lined with beautiful tapestries, The furniture was elegant and finely crafted, and the soft crackle of the fireplace in the corner filled the space with warmth. She had never imagined a place like this, and she could hardly believe she was here. The door creaked open, and Isabella turned to see Alexander standing in the doorway. His silver eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was nothing but the two of them in the room. His expression softened, and he stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but warm. "How did you sleep?" Isabella hesitated for a moment before answering. "Better than I've ever slept," she said quietly, her voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. She had never felt safe enough to truly rest before. But here, with Alexander, it was different. She felt protected. "I'm glad to hear that," Alexander replied, his gaze never leaving hers. He took a step closer, and Isabella instinctively took a small step back, her heart racing. She quickly reminded herself that he meant no harm. He was here to protect her, but the closeness of his presence still made her feel like a fragile thing, something easily broken. Alexander noticed her unease, and his expression softened further. "You have nothing to fear here," he said, his voice soothing. "You are safe." Isabella nodded, though she still couldn't shake the doubt that lingered in her mind. Was she truly safe? Could she truly trust that this would last? Alexander seemed to sense her hesitation. "Isabella," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I know you've been hurt. I know the world has been cruel to you. But here, you are more than just an Omega. You are a part of something greater." She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, but found none. His eyes were unwavering, filled with a sincerity that made her believe in his words. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being told she was worthless. She wasn't being told she didn't belong. "I don't know what to do with all of this," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is all so new." Alexander nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Take your time," he said gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. But know this, you are not alone anymore. I will be here for you." His words were simple, but they held a weight that made her chest tighten. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could believe in something better. As she looked at him, standing before her with such calm strength, Isabella realized that she had never felt more seen in her life. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just an Omega to be discarded. She was someone who mattered. And for the first time, she felt like she might be worthy of the love and protection Alexander was offering. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'll try to believe that." Alexander smiled, a small, genuine smile that made his silver eyes shine with warmth. "That's all I ask." He stepped back, giving her space, and Isabella felt a sudden sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in this moment, she felt ready to face it. With Alexander by her side, she believed that anything was possible. Isabella spent the next few days adjusting to her new life in the castle. Each morning, she woke to the same soft glow of the sun filtering through the windows, a reminder that her world had changed. She was no longer the Omega who had been cast aside. She was now someone's responsibility, someone who was cared for. As the days passed, she found herself growing more comfortable in the palace, though there was still a lingering sense of disbelief. The castle was everything she had imagined and more. The towering stone walls and luxurious furnishings made her feel like she was living in a dream, but it was the small things that truly made her feel different, like the soft smile Alexander would give her when they crossed paths, or the way he seemed to always know when she needed space or comfort. She spent her time exploring the castle, meeting its inhabitants, and adjusting to her new routine. She was learning about the responsibilities of an alpha king, hearing stories of Alexander's reign, and understanding the deep respect his people had for him. It was strange to think that she was now a part of this world where power, respect, and authority were the currency of life. On the third day, Alexander invited her to walk with him in the castle's gardens. Isabella had never seen anything so beautiful. The gardens were vast, filled with vibrant flowers, towering trees, and winding paths that seemed to go on forever. The scent of fresh blooms filled the air, and the soft hum of nature surrounded them as they walked. "I wanted to show you this," Alexander said, glancing over at Isabella. "I thought you might enjoy it." Isabella smiled, grateful for the gesture. "It's beautiful," she replied, taking in the view around them. I've never seen anything like it. The two walked in silence for a moment, the sound of their footsteps the only noise between them. Isabella couldn't help but feel a sense of peace in the gardens. For once, it felt like she belonged somewhere. Do you ever miss your old life? Isabella asked, breaking the silence. She hadn't meant to bring up such a heavy question, but the curiosity had been gnawing at her. Sometimes, Alexander said after a moment, his voice thoughtful. But I've come to realize that the life I had before was one I no longer needed. My responsibilities here, to my pack, to my people, those are what matter now. Isabella nodded, her thoughts drifting. She understood what he meant. She had been living a life of rejection and isolation, but now, she was given a chance to build something new, to forge a future that was hers. And you? Alexander asked, turning to her with a curious expression. Do you ever think about your old life? Isabella hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. Sometimes, she said softly, but I don't want to go back. I want to be better. I want to live a life that's different from what I've known. Alexander's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw something more than just the alpha king in his eyes. He was a man, one who understood the weight of responsibility and the burden of change. You will, he said quietly. You're stronger than you think. And here, you will have everything you need to become the person you've always wanted to be. Isabella looked up at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. She didn't know if she could truly become the person Alexander believed she could be, but in that moment, with him by her side, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could try. As they continued walking through the gardens, the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light over the castle. The day was coming to an end, but for Isabella, it felt like the beginning of something new, something she had never dared to hope for before. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was living, and that was all thanks to the man walking beside her. Days passed, and Isabella began to settle into her new life at the castle. The unease that had clung to her at first slowly melted away, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. She found herself waking up each morning with a sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in years. Her days were filled with learning, exploring the castle, and spending time with Alexander. He was always nearby, always offering guidance, but never pushing her. She had quickly come to realize that he wasn't just an alpha king. He was also a man who understood what it meant to be alone. Isabella spent hours walking through the gardens, reading the books in the library, and learning about the customs of the castle and the surrounding territories. She even began to practice some of the skills expected of an Omega in the royal court, skills she had never imagined needing before. But it was during one of these quiet afternoons, when the castle was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, that she found herself drawn to a new room in the castle, a room she hadn't noticed before. The door was slightly ajar, and as she peered inside, she saw shelves lined with old, dusty scrolls and books. The room was peaceful, almost sacred, and Isabella felt an undeniable pull to it. She stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her, the silence welcoming her like a soft embrace. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, each one telling a story of a time long past. Her heart raced as she took in the history before her, feeling like a part of something much bigger than herself. As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Alexander standing in the doorway, his silver eyes warm but serious. I see you found the archives, he said, his voice calm and steady. They are the heart of the castle's history. Isabella nodded, feeling a rush of excitement. I didn't know this room existed, she said, her voice filled with awe. It feels important. It is, Alexander replied, stepping inside. This room holds the history of our people, the stories of our ancestors, of the alphas who came before me. It's where we keep the knowledge of the past so that we don't repeat our mistakes. Isabella looked at the shelves, her fingers still grazing the spines of the books. Do you come here often? She asked, curious. Alexander hesitated for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. I did. Once, he said quietly. Before I became the Alpha King, before I had so many responsibilities. He stepped closer to Isabella, his presence steady and strong. Now, I come when I need to remember who I am, when I need to ground myself. Isabella met his gaze, seeing the weight of his words in his eyes. She had always known Alexander was a powerful leader, but in that moment, she saw the man behind the title. She saw the struggles he had faced, the sacrifices he had made. "I never imagined this life," Isabella said softly. "I never imagined I would be here, with you." Alexander looked at her, his expression softening. "And yet, here you are. And here you will stay." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "Stay?" she whispered, unsure of what he meant. "Yes," Alexander said, his voice filled with conviction. "You're not going anywhere. You belong here with me." Isabella felt a rush of emotion flood her chest. For so long, she had been an outsider, never truly belonging anywhere. But here, with Alexander, she felt like she was finally where she was meant to be. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Then don't say anything," Alexander replied gently, stepping closer to her. "Just stay with me." Isabella nodded, her heart racing as she took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with Alexander. With him, she was finally home. Isabella woke the next morning to the soft warmth of sunlight streaming through the window. The air in the castle felt different today, lighter somehow, as if the weight of her doubts and fears had lessened overnight. She stretched slowly, savoring the comfort of the bed and the peaceful silence of her new life. The past week had been a whirlwind, but every day she grew more accustomed to her surroundings, to the kindness of Alexander, and to the sense of belonging she had never known. She rose and walked to the window, peering out at the sprawling gardens below. The castle stood like a silent guardian over the land, its towering walls and high towers a constant reminder of the power that resided here. Yet, for all its grandeur, it felt like a home to her now. She was no longer just an outsider. She was someone of value. As she turned to leave the room, she heard a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, her voice soft but steady. The door opened, and there stood Alexander, as composed as ever, though his eyes softened the moment he saw her. "Good morning, Isabella," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I hope you slept well." She smiled, nodding. "I did, thank you." He stepped inside, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. There was something in his expression, something that made her heart skip a beat. It was the same look he had given her the first time they had shared a quiet moment in the garden, the look that had made her feel as though she were the only person in the world. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice serious. "It's time we took the next step. Your role here is important, and I want you to understand the full scope of what that means." Isabella furrowed her brow, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You've been living in the castle, and you've started to get familiar with our customs and routines," Alexander explained. "But there's more you need to know. As the Luna, you will be expected to help guide and support the people of this kingdom. It's not just about standing by my side. It's about becoming a true partner, one who helps lead and protect this realm." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his words settled over her like a mantle. She had never imagined herself in such a position. She had always thought of herself as a mere bystander, someone who was never meant to be part of something bigger. But now, Alexander was telling her that she had a role to play, one that was just as vital as his own. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she said quietly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Alexander stepped closer, his expression softening. "You don't have to be ready all at once," he said, his hand gently touching her arm. "You've already shown me the strength you have. You've proven yourself in ways that most people would never understand." She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, and for the first time, she began to believe him. She had always thought of herself as weak, unworthy of such a life. But here, with Alexander, she was starting to see herself differently. "I will help you," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I will try." Alexander's smile widened, and in that moment, Isabella felt something stir within her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. She wasn't alone anymore. "That's all I ask," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Together, we'll make sure this kingdom thrives." The words lingered in the air, and for the first time, Isabella felt as though she was part of something greater than herself. She wasn't just a broken Omega anymore. She was a Luna, and she had a purpose. She had a place beside Alexander, and that was more than she had ever dreamed possible. As the days passed, Isabella felt herself growing into her new role, though she was still learning the intricacies of palace life. She spent hours with Alexander, learning about the kingdom, the history of the lands, and the responsibilities that came with being the Luna. He had always been patient, guiding her with a steady hand, but there was an underlying urgency in his lessons. The kingdom depended on their unity, on their ability to work together for the good of the people. One afternoon, as they walked through the castle halls, Isabella couldn't help but notice the weight of Alexander's gaze on her. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to his quiet strength, but there were moments when his eyes seemed to look right through her, as if he were seeing something she couldn't. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. Alexander paused, turning to face her. His eyes were serious, but there was a flicker of something else there, a deep thought that he had been carrying. "There's a growing unrest in the Eastern Territories," he said, his voice low. "I've heard whispers of dissatisfaction among the smaller packs. They don't feel as though their voices are being heard, and some are even questioning my leadership." Isabella felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew the power Alexander held, but she also understood the burden that came with it. The weight of an entire kingdom rested on his shoulders, and he could not afford to falter. "What will you do?" she asked, her heart heavy. Alexander's gaze softened as he reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "I need to go there," he said quietly. "I need to meet with the leaders and show them that I am still their king, that I have not forgotten the people, who rely on me. But I can't do this alone. I need you by my side." Isabella looked at him, her heart swelling with both fear and pride. She had never imagined that she would be part of something so important, so monumental. She had never thought of herself as a leader, but Alexander's belief in her had changed everything. She was not just an Omega anymore. She was his Luna, his equal in this fight for the kingdom's future. "I'll go with you," she said, her voice steady and filled with resolve. Alexander smiled, a rare, soft smile that made her feel like the center of his world. "I knew you would." They spent the next few days preparing for the journey, gathering advisors, and organizing the details of their trip. The Eastern Territories were far, and the journey would take several days. Isabella had heard rumors about the state of those lands, of the discontent among the people, of the struggles they faced in the wake of the kingdom's changing leadership. She couldn't help but wonder if she was ready for what lay ahead. But as the days passed and the preparations were made, she found herself growing more certain. She was ready. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been abandoned by her pack. She was the Luna of the Alpha King, and she would stand by his side through whatever came. On the day they were set to leave, Isabella stood at the gates of the castle, looking out at the wide expanse of the lands that stretched before her. The kingdom she was now a part of, the kingdom she was beginning to love. Alexander stood beside her, his presence strong and reassuring. "Together, we will show them that we are a force to be reckoned with," he said, his voice full of conviction. Isabella nodded, her heart filled with a fierce determination. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would ensure that the kingdom remained united and strong. And no matter what, she would never be alone again.